Jim, thanks for coming on. I really appreciate you taking the time to have a conversation with me. Would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself before we get started?
Sure. I'm Jim Slagel. I was educated in philosophy, at least on the continent in Europe, and got my doctorate over there. And I'm currently an adjunct professor at the University of Portland. I'm from Portland for the most part. I was from Boston until I was 6, and then my family moved out here, so I consider myself a native Portlander since I was 6. But that's pretty much it. I've written a couple of books. First one's called the Epistemological Skyhook, which is about, the subtitle is Determinism, Naturalism, and Self-Defeat, because there's lots of arguments, sometimes even just paragraphs in books that say that determinism is self-defeating or naturalism is self-defeating. And so I go over those. And my second book just came out last, The Evolutionary Argument Against Naturalism, which is Alvin Plantinga's version of this kind of argument. And I've written several papers that you can read online or wherever too. So
awesome. Yeah, I'm quite familiar with those arguments as an online atheist. I hear those quite a bit. So tell me about the evolutionary argument against naturalism. What is your take on Plantinga's arguments? That I believe the argument goes something like, if evolution selects for survivability and not truth, then we have no reason to trust any of our beliefs because we evolved for survivability. And so evolution could have given us any number of beliefs, and we have no reason to trust our knowledge if we believe naturalism is true. Something along those lines.
Yeah. I mean, I don't agree 100% with Plantinga, how he because I thought it was unnecessary to bring evolution into it, because that's just already going to, it's pouring gasoline on a fire that's already out of control, but I thought it could just be a naturalism, a self-defeating argument. But his point, yeah, like you said, I mean, the first premise would be the kicker, that if naturalism is true, naturalism meaning that natural processes and objects are all that exist or occur, then that gives us a defeater for the belief that our minds, that our belief-forming processes are reliable, that they tend to form true beliefs more often than not. And if that's the case, then it gives us a defeater for any belief produced by those processes, our rational processes, which would be all of them. Evolution is such a belief. So therefore, if naturalism is true, we are not rational accepting evolution. That's his claim. Now, so his point is evolution. His point is to say that naturalism and evolution are usually conceived as going together really nicely. And his argument is that there's a dichotomy between them. You can accept one, but you can't accept both. That's his point. It's kind of really trying to stick the blade in under the rib cage there,
What is your take on it?
I think it works. I think it's unnecessarily provocative. Well, maybe I shouldn't say unnecessarily, but it's provocative. Because like I said, I wouldn't bring evolution into it, because that just makes it harder for people to even hear the argument. I mean, so many people think that, the evolutionary argument against naturalism is supposed to be an argument against evolution. And it's not. It's saying, granted evolution, then naturalism the case. Now, granted, you could deny both naturalism and evolution, but I'm not doing that. I don't know if Plantinga believes in evolution. I have no idea. But I do. I reject naturalistic evolution, naturalism in general. But that's the rough idea behind it. And so that's naturalism or evolution, but not both. Now, a further problem that I would point out, which is why I think it's unnecessary to bring evolution into it, is that say you accept that and say you can accept naturalism or evolution, I'm going to stick with naturalism. You can do the same thing with naturalism. If naturalism is true, then our belief-forming abilities are not reliable, in which case any belief formed by them would not be trustworthy, which would include naturalism itself. So you can't stick with naturalism, right? You can accept evolution and reject naturalism, but you can't accept naturalism and just keep going. That's how I would put it. Although, I mean, obviously it's an argument, it's it's controversial for a reason. I'm not expecting to win lots of people to my side necessarily. I think it's
So why would theism be preferred to naturalism in this case? And
yeah.
what?
Well, I don't actually argue that theism is preferable. I'm a born again Bible thumper, but that's not part of the philosophical case I make. That's I'm just arguing that it's a negative argument against naturalism. So obviously, I have to propose something beyond nature and naturalism, but I don't really go too far into that. I don't really assess what needs to be done, what needs to be added.
Well, the argument I would just to clarify, the argument I would take would be something along the lines of, normally a theist would say something like God gives us true knowledge or something along those lines. And I would say that we can parody that and say naturalism is equally as capable of giving us true knowledge. And so even if naturalism is true, that doesn't preclude us from having knowledge. For the same reason that even if God is true, it doesn't preclude us from having false knowledge. It's possible that the nature of whatever the ontology of reality is either has some quality that gives us true knowledge or gives us false knowledge. And simply the fact that naturalism is true doesn't tell us one way or the other. So like, say a calculator is designed, the designer could have designed it correctly and it gets good math, or it could have designed it incorrectly and gave it bad math.
Right.
And so either way, it doesn't really tell us which is the case.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's right. I mean, but both of those points would really hold to true belief, not knowledge per se, not justified true belief or whatever you add to true belief to make knowledge. I think what you said is completely right about, well, I'll get back to that. I'll just say it's true belief. But the problem with naturalism is that if you have true belief that's being brought about by just the natural processes, by purely natural processes, etc., then it becomes difficult to say that you believe it because it's true. You believe it for some other reason. You believe it. The ultimate reason why you believe it is for something other than because it's true. Okay, and I argue at the end of the book, the reason you believe it is because because it's true. You've encountered its truth in some way, and that's why you believe it. What's true, and other form, not just naturalism, lots of things. But if naturalism is true, then the ultimate reason why you believe something is not because it's true; it's because it has its background in our evolutionary history or psychological forces, or even God or whatever. It would have this other reason for why you believe it, and as long as that's the case, then if those other causes brought about false beliefs, you would have no way of knowing. So that's kind of the point. You have to believe it's true, and while there's other things in play, there's plenty of other things in play, they can't eclipse that one purpose, that you believe it because it's true. Because otherwise, if there was something that eclipsed it, then whether it's true or false would be irrelevant to your believing of it. That's the point.
Do we believe anything because it's true? Like, to me, it seems like we always need some kind of epistemic means to gain some kind of belief that it's true, but we never have access to truthiness, like the noumena phenomena distinction. Like, we don't have access to the way reality fundamentally is in and of itself. We only have some kind of appearance of it through our brains, through our sense experience, whatever. And so it seems like it's like impossible to believe anything because it's true. We always need some kind of epistemic medium to get there.
Well, saying there's epistemic media doesn't deny. I mean, there's lots of epistemic issues going on. I'm just saying that the ultimate reason, not the only reason, but the ultimate reason why you believe it is because it's true, then that would allow it to be knowledge. And this would be for any kind of knowledge, mathematical knowledge, whatever. But and if the ultimate reason is something else or doesn't exist or whatever, then you wouldn't believe it because it's true. Now, as to the noumena phenomena, I don't think encountering truth would be like the noumena. I think we directly encounter truth. So I don't think, for example, that sensory knowledge is, I think the senses are an aspect of developing sensory knowledge, but I would say that when I look at something and see it, I'm directly perceiving it. I'm not, even though there's like a medium there by which I'm perceiving it, I think I directly perceive it. The same with like moral knowledge, all kinds of knowledge. I think I just directly perceive that these things are true. So I think you do encounter the truth of these things. They're not, the truth of something is not a physical aspect though. It's not something that you're encountering, it's kind of an ephemeral idea that of the truth of X.
I'm not sure what you mean when you say believe something because it's true. I don't follow, because I don't see like the truth of it being a reason to believe anything. And it doesn't seem like the fact that it's true could ever be a reason that could like justify it. It seems circular, just to be like, well, I believe it because it's true. Or like,
Yeah.
You need some like intermediary step there. You couldn't just say, I believe it because it's true. It seems, I don't understand how you could ever believe anything simply because it's true. I don't understand that sentence.
Well, first I'd say it's not simply, there's a lot of other things in play. But when I say like the ultimate reason is that it's true, that means that like in other parallel universes, right, possible worlds, another reason why you would believe it, a different reason other than its truth that eclipses that its truth. So whether it's true or not, you would believe it anyway. Okay. So that's what I would say. So believing it, I'm not saying this is like the method in the sense that you believe it because it's true, and so you can just stop talking and just say, I believe it because it's true, I'm done. I'm trying to define the concept of knowledge. So I believe this in order for you to believe anything, or to have knowledge rather of anything, you have to believe it. There has to be an explanation for the belief. It has to be a good explanation for the belief. And it has to be my explanation why I believe it. I don't have to originate the explanation for it, but I do have to make whatever explanation there is, my reason, whatever, for believing it.
So like, say we had two worlds. We both believe the world is round, and in one of them, you're in the matrix, and so the world's actually flat, and you just don't realize it yet. But our reason in both worlds is the novel predictions of science, testing the Euclidean geometry of the world, and looking at the phases of the moon, doing all the different tests. They're all the same in both worlds. So using these as our basis to come to the conclusion that the world is round. But in one, it's clearly false. So what is the difference there in your statement that you believe because it's true? How would that apply differently in these two cases?
Well, it would be the same. In one case, it wouldn't be knowledge because you wouldn't believe it. Again, I'm not trying to provide a method for how you determine whether particular beliefs are true or not, or whether you believe it for the right reason. I'm just trying to. It's an abstract definition of knowledge that I'm addressing here.
Well, I'm getting lost in the believe it because it's true, because it seems like you're saying that sentence seems to just be synonymous with it's true. So like, it's true that the world is round, therefore I have a justified belief due to my knowledge of science, and it happens to be true that the world is round, therefore I have knowledge in this world. But if I was in the matrix world, I would still have a justified belief that the world is round because I have the same information. It would just be false. But I don't see like the sentence believe it because it's true. Those those words don't meet together in like a coherent way in my brain. Like, it seems like if you just say it's knowledge because it's true in the world where it happens to be the case where the world is round, that makes sense. Yes, it's knowledge in that world. It's not knowledge in the other world because it's false. But I don't understand what adding believe because of in front of the truth adds to that sentence.
Well, let me put it to you, just looking like flat Earth, round Earth. People believed like 3,000 years ago or 2,500 years ago that the Earth was flat, right? And presumably they had some reasons for it. There were probably, I mean, it doesn't really appear to be round from someone on the surface of the Earth, especially if you're not on a mountain or anything, depending on your sea level or whatever. And so they have a reason for believing it, and they make this their reason or their explanation for believing that the Earth is flat. But it's ultimately not a good explanation. Now, maybe one of the issues in epistemology is internalism versus externalism. And with externalism, you don't have to know whether that the belief has a good reason or not behind it, not explanation, but a good reason behind it in order for it to qualify as knowledge. And so when we're talking about knowledge, again, I'm not suggesting that that there's not plenty of mistakes now and in the past, and in the future there'll be plenty of mistakes because people will have reasons and they will make them their reasons for believing it. But ultimately there won't be good reasons. So I'm not, again, this is not about how to determine whether particular beliefs or systems are true or false or justified or whatever you want to call it. It's how you determine it. The truth category is something that is going to be an abstract concept of the concept of knowledge. So people can have justified beliefs that aren't true, but they won't know that they're not true. And maybe there's the true belief, the true statement is not available to anybody. So everybody has justified beliefs, but none of them are true. No one can make the distinction. No one knows exactly what the truth is, but they think they know it. And that's just that's just human nature, right? That's just part of being human beings, that sometimes we don't have access to the truth, but then we think we do and we're wrong. So I'm not trying to analyze how can we rationally, like a method by how we rationally form beliefs. I'm just saying that in order to something to qualify as knowledge, it has to be true and you have to believe it, and you have to have something else. I say that's the because, you believe it because it's true. But like justified true belief is a standard definition of knowledge, the traditional definition of knowledge. So, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we'll get lucky and actually have the true belief. I shouldn't say get lucky. I mean, maybe the true belief is something we won't discover for another 500 years of scientific analysis.
Yeah, so I'm pretty familiar with the JTB theory of knowledge. And in that definition of knowledge, like you can't say, do you know that you know it? Because it's asking, do you have a justified true belief that you have a justified true belief? And so if you have like a justified true belief the world is round, and you ask, do I have a justified true belief about my belief that the world is round? It doesn't make any sense, because it's not your belief that you believe the world is round can't be true. So you can't, it's not possible to have knowledge, to know that you know, because you can't have a true statement about your belief that you believe the world is round. It can't, it's just an opinion. So I don't understand how that applies in your definition. The believe because it's true. I don't understand that criterion. I do agree that you need a third criterion. That's true, but I don't understand what your criterion is exactly. Like, is it a fact of the world? Is it a fact of your mind? Is it a correspondence fact? I don't get it.
Well, it's not. I think it's not the third aspect of knowledge. I think it's the second. Right? You can have justified beliefs that aren't true. Now you'll think that you're doing the right thing, but just because maybe you're even being completely responsible, that doesn't change the fact you can have justified false beliefs. So when I talk about so I think it's the second element. I mean, people who thought the Earth was flat 2,500 years ago, not the people who think the Earth is flat today, they don't have justified beliefs regardless, right? But people who thought that 2,500 years ago, they had justified false beliefs. And so since it was not a justified true belief, it wasn't knowledge. They thought they knew that the Earth was flat, but they were wrong. And 500 years in the future, certain things that we think are knowledge, that are justified true beliefs, will be proven that will be justified false beliefs, and will be wrong, right? So it's we can be completely.
Yeah, so it seems like you're just using believe because it's true to be synonymous with truth. Like those. No. It seems like no.
I'm connecting the two. There's a debate in epistemology whether whether the truth and the justification have to be connected, or the belief and the truth aspects have to be connected. You believe it and it's true, and then whether justification connects the two, or whether justification is just a third element to be added onto it. And I'm saying it's something that has to connect the belief with the truth. Justification often captured that because it said that you had a good reason for believing that that the proposition was true, and so you believed it because you thought it was true in some level. But you can also make many mistakes. You can have justified false beliefs.
So you said that the justification has to connect to the truth. So like my experience of the world, if my experience of the world is the way the world actually is, then that justification would connect to the way the world, to the truth. Whereas if I was in the Matrix, my experience of the world would not connect to the truth because it would be a delusion of some kind.
Right.
And so you're saying that in order for it to count as knowledge, the justification has to connect to the truth, but we can never know that, right?
I say that. Other people with that, but yeah.
Yeah. But we can never, there's no way to know that, right? That's not a thing we could ever that's not a thing we could ever verify, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I'm not saying that, again, we could be wrong about everything or right about everything. So I'm not using this to point to something, just something specific. And getting it back to naturalism, the point is that if naturalism is true, it leaves us in limbo. Whether God exists or not, I'm not convinced that does any better by itself. I think you actually have to argue backwards. I mean, Descartes tried to bring it back to like the ground level and then argue from the I think, therefore I am, argue up. I don't think you can argue up. I think you have to start at the top saying we do know some things. Maybe we're wrong about some of them, but we have some knowledge, then argue backwards from that. But that still leaves it open that God exists and we don't have any knowledge.
So would there be any possible worldview that could overcome that issue? It doesn't seem like there's any way that could actually provide that, the knowledge that your justification has a direct correlation to the truth. It doesn't seem like there's anything that could actually give you that. Even if God existed and he told you so, well, you could be an evil demon. Even if you had direct experience of the world, your mind was the only mind. No way for you to know that. It seems like there wouldn't be a possible worldview that could overcome that challenge. And so it wouldn't just apply to naturalism, it would apply to any worldview.
Well, I think what you need is, I think there is, but it's not like you start with this worldview and that ensures that you get knowledge, because that would be Descartes' method of arguing from the bottom up. But I think if you start with the idea we have knowledge, what must be necessary in order for that to be the case. And if you do that, I think certain forms of theism would work. I think a friend of mine wrote a book recently where he's not a theist, he's an atheist, and he argues that there are necessary truths that are like necessary moral truths in addition to necessary logical truths. And he doesn't say necessary. He would say or logical truths. He would say necessary. I forget what he calls them. But this is William Talbot. He wrote a book recently, and he argues that you can have. And I suggested to him that it was kind of similar to Plato's forms, which he vehemently disagrees with. So, it's his book, so probably you should go with his understanding of his own position. But it's something like, I say it's vaguely something like that. So you don't need a God to explain that. And if his system works, then that would be a way to ensure that we could have knowledge without the existence of God. I disagree. I think you do need something like God. I think you need something to bring the two parts together. The connection is not the connection between contingent facts of the physical universe and the necessary facts of knowledge and certain truths are different, and so they have to have something to put them together.
So could you tell me the difference between God doing this and just the nature doing this in some way? Like, why would we? Because you said that we have to start with the assumption we have knowledge and then ask what is necessary to have knowledge. And like, what would that be? What is necessary to have knowledge, and why can't we have that under naturalism?
Mostly because under naturalism, there's no ultimate reason for your forming of there's either no ultimate reason why you form the beliefs you do, or there's an ultimate reason that's different from the ultimate reason of forming true beliefs. You believe it because our evolutionary background entails that we have like moral beliefs or certain beliefs or something like that. So there would be either there'd be no ultimate reason, or there would be an ultimate reason that's not I gotta say, I've been a
So
little distracted by your commenters over here because several of them keep commenting on how thick my head looks, and I must have broken a few legs in the past. So
ignore the chat. They're chats.
no, it's just I'm trying to look as sophisticated as I can, and I still look like a thug, you know.
I get that all the time, actually. But people, I appreciate it because they pay me. They send me money and then tell me how ugly I am in the comments. I'm like, thank you for the money. So,
Yeah.
but so how does God solve this problem? God,
Well, it would have to be God with you would have to define God in a certain way. You would have to define God so that this God is basically the not just the source, but the ground of reality, the ground of truth, the ground of morality, the ground of rationality. And if
well,
that
would you need
God,
all of that? So, like,
well,
what's
ultimately
like the minimum
the same
requirement in order
thing, I think.
to? So, like, what's the minimum requirement to achieve justification? So, say there's a God and he created just you and not everything else. Everything else is already there, but he's still omniscient to some degree. He still knows everything. He could still deliberately create you with the intent of you having true beliefs. So he's created you and he wants you to have true beliefs, and so he gives you a brain capable of having true beliefs or whatever. Would that person have knowledge by your definition?
If God created him so that he formed true beliefs, well, you have to add more to it. I don't think that's enough to say that he would have knowledge in that case, because if that God is not the ground of morality, for example, then he could be deceptive, and then in that case there'd be no way of he could form you to form true beliefs, or he could create you to form false beliefs, right? So of morality, he has to be the ground of rationality, because that's rationality and intellect are like the conduit for forming knowledge. He has to be the ground of reality, because if something else were the ground of reality, then that could overrule his God, which would also mean that he would have to be omnipotent with qualifications, depending on what you mean by that. It would have to be omnipotent so that nothing overrules this God's ability to create you so that you form true beliefs. But I also should point out, I'm not a theistic determinist, because I think when you get into theistic determinism, you create a problem with, and it's not that theistic determinists aren't aware of this, but you create a problem with God is then responsible for your false beliefs. And how do you figure that out? How do you account for you having false beliefs?
So let's say God isn't omnipotent, or there is an omnipotent God, but there's a different guy, different omnipotent God, and he's just not interfering. So the minor God creates a person with the intention of true beliefs, and he could lie, but he's not. He's just not lying. And the other God could interfere, but he's just not doing it. Does this person who has been created have knowledge in your case?
I would say no. Now, part of the reason, one point to say here is that traditionally, the idea of omnipotence is that there can't be more than one omnipotent being, because then it would allow the possibility of, even if they never do, it allows the possibility of their omnipotence to interfere with each other, in which case you don't have omnipotence, because one of them would be overruled by the other, right? And I should point out, I'm not arguing whether we have knowledge. I'm granting that we have knowledge. I'm accepting that, that our the evolutionary process is going to be part of the process by which all this happens. I don't deny any of this. I'm just saying that I don't think it's enough, if I could put it that way. By itself, I don't think it guarantees knowledge.
I don't see why you would need to guarantee knowledge in that way. It doesn't seem like it's a big deal if, like, a minor God, like, I understand, like, there can only be one omnipotent thing by definition, but that's just to make the argument.
Yeah.
If there's a minor God who creates you and nothing's interfering with it, it seems like you have justified true beliefs. I don't see why you'd need this absolute irrefutable method to gain knowledge that can't ever be overturned by anything as the foundation of reality. Like, that doesn't seem to be, why would that be a requirement?
Well, it wouldn't be, there isn't, irrefutability is not an element in here. I would say the reason for that,
you said he had to be all powerful because if there's another more powerful being, he could be overturned. You said he has to be perfectly good because he couldn't lie. So it has to be like literally logically impossible to obtain a false belief in order for knowledge to be justified. And that doesn't,
No, not that it's logically, I mean, it would be logically impossible for God to have a false belief, right? But he doesn't form us perfect. He doesn't say that we're perfect. And also part of the Judeo-Christian concept is that we're fallen, so that we're very, very, very imperfect, right? But that's not the idea that we are. It's impossible for us to form false beliefs. It's the matter of whether it's possible for us to form any item of knowledge, whether anything we believe can be considered justified true belief. So it's not whether it's impossible for us to make a mistake. Of course we make mistakes. That's not the issue.
Well, yes. So to clarify, for any given fact, it is impossible for us to get that one fact wrong ever. Essentially,
Even then, I'd say no. It's a hard point. I'm not saying for a particular fact. I'm saying that in the pantheon of beliefs that all human beings have throughout history, it's possible for one of them to be knowledge. That's all I'm going with. Now, I think there are, in fact, many items of knowledge that everybody has, right? You know a lot of things. I know a lot of things. But to make this point, I'm just saying that it's possible for us to have, and in order for it to be possible for someone, somewhere, sometime to have an item of knowledge, it would have to be. Then it can't be the case that something could overrule the conditions that make knowledge possible, because if it's just if it's not a perfect being, if it's not a supreme being, something else that forms us and does so with good intent and aptly, all this, and so we form those true beliefs, and that there's a higher reality, but that higher reality doesn't interfere. I don't think that would be enough for knowledge to be the case, because it would be possible for that higher reality to interfere. So the necessity is just on the physical case of the ground of existence or anything like that. It's not on us. There's no necessary stuff for us because we're contingent. We're not necessary. We're contingent.
Well, the issue I see, I don't see a problem. Like if I imagine there's three worlds, three universes, and one of them, there's this omni God that you believe in that creates beings and they have knowledge that the world is around. He's just, and then there's one with the mini God who created them, and the bigger God is just not interfering, and they have knowledge, or they have belief that the world is round and the world is round. And there's a world with no God, and it's just naturalism, and we evolved, and evolution gave us beliefs that happen to correspond to reality, maybe just because of luck or whatever, and the world is round and they believe the world is round.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see any substantive difference between the two. They all have justified true beliefs. I think they're all fine to believe all of them. I don't see any requirement that there must be this absolutist ground connected to anything. Why would one have less knowledge than the other? They all seem to have equal knowledge as far as I can tell.
They all have equal beliefs, but I would not say they all have equal knowledge, because in the case of like the naturalist universe, the ultimate reason why they believe the earth is round is not in order to believe the truth. It's because it was useful to their evolutionary ancestors or something like that. That's the ultimate reason. And if that ultimate in other words, the truth of the belief plays no role in their forming the belief, right? It's just a coincidence. And I don't mean coincidence in like a haphazard kind of way. I mean, in the logical sense, it's not a necessary connection, right? So I don't mean it's just a haphazard. I'm not, because a lot of people try to appeal to evolution and say it's all by accident. It's like, well, the first step of evolution, the mutation part is accident, maybe in a sense, but the selection part, I mean, it's obviously not accident if it's selection. So if evolution is helping us form our beliefs by natural selection, then that's not accidental. But it's still, I would still say that ultimately the reason why you believe it is not because it's true. It's for some other reason. Justified.
Well, let's say that there's some law in physics where the truth of a statement is the determining factor in what makes brains prone to learning it or something. If there's an undiscovered law of physics that's out there, and it makes it so that conscious brains are prone or attempt or are designed to try to learn true facts.
Mhm.
So now it seems like that the truth of the fact is what determines or is what grounds our knowledge of it. So it seems like that would count.
Well, but you can create space in between there. I mean, that's the problem. I mean, Plantinga does this in a really, again, I love Plantinga, but he's really very politely obnoxious. Okay. The way he puts it is that a belief that helps you survive, if you like, he's like, if you see an approaching wild wildebeest about to attack, though I don't think they attack humans, but regardless, approaching you, and you have the belief that's dangerous, I should run away, that will help you survive. But there's lots of beliefs that would help, that would prevent, but that would cause the same actions that are false, right? Like the appearance of an approaching wildebeest indicates that I just won the publisher's clearinghouse, so I should get back to my house and look in the mail. You know, that would have the same impact. So the issue, and I would say that a deeper issue that I was hinting at earlier, is that it's not easy to see how you could have beliefs in the usual sense, that like propositional beliefs at all, if naturalism is true. How could you believe? I mean, what you have in naturalism is just the natural processes. You don't have on top of that propositional beliefs, like my belief that the swallows have returned to Capistrano has as its content the proposition the swallows have returned from Capistrano. But natural processes in other natural objects, natural processes don't just have propositional content. So how do you even have belief under naturalism? And then if you skip that and say, okay, you can have belief, how do you have belief that's true? And then if you grant that, then how do you have belief that's relevant to the actual circumstances? And I don't think naturalism can accommodate any of those. Now, when I say it can't accommodate it, I don't mean that there wouldn't be some kind of weeding out of false beliefs, but it wouldn't be enough to make meet the level of knowledge. Now, you can also just deny my level of knowledge, because I am setting a kind of high standard for knowledge. I grant that.
Oh, yeah, I definitely would. I say that I don't think your standard of knowledge is realistic. I don't think you could have changed that even with a God, because it just seems like you're begging the question. It's like you seem to have defined, in my worldview, there is a being who is a bunch of omnis, and so nothing can overtain it, and its ultimate goal was to create us with true beliefs, and that's why we can have knowledge. And I can just say, okay, I can just say there's a law of physics that's an ultimate omni, has no consciousness, but nature is such that it makes brains with true beliefs. And of course, it can allow for false beliefs. There can be other laws that can go against it, but ultimately this law is the supreme law that is unchangeable, necessary law, and it is determined to make brains that are have true knowledge. And it seems like I have an equal justification now, but simply positing a made-up ultimate justification that is intent on giving us true beliefs doesn't seem to add anything. It just seems like we're just making stuff up. I don't.
Well, what you're saying, it wouldn't be a physical. I don't think a physical truth, because if any mere physical truth would be contingent by definition. But if you do something like with William Talbot, like if you, instead of saying a physical reality that just there's a natural law or a metaphysical law that just produces brains that form true beliefs, that would be like what William Talbot does, and that is definitely a route you can take. I mean, I would suggest reading his book is called Learning from Our Mistakes. So that would be a way to meet my requirements without God. That would be a way to do it.
Well, one objection there is I don't think physical things are necessarily contingent. There's no reason to think that there could be necessary physical things, just like there could be necessary non-physical things. Like there would be no reason to think that physical thing couldn't be necessary, because there are physical things that are outside of space-time. That's the consensus in physics about quantum fields. So I don't see any reason to think that physical would necessitate it being contingent for any reason.
But universes aren't necessary. I mean, it's logically possible for universes to not exist.
Well, it's logically possible for God to not exist.
Well,
it seems like,
according to theists, it's not a supreme being. And I'm not giving it on to it. The definition, at least as it's usually understood of a supreme being, is that it can't not exist. It's logically possible for it to not exist.
Right. So the justification, Well, so the justification for it being necessary is that theists imagine and define it as such, in which case I can just imagine and define a law of physics as such. And so they have equal justification for being necessary beings. And so if that is the requirement for knowledge, is to imagine and define a thing as such being necessary, well, I can just do that for a law of physics. And it seems like I would get equal justification there. And so I don't see why naturalism couldn't just do the same thing, because it seems like all we're doing is saying there is something we don't know, and we're going to posit a God of the gaps, a filler for the whole, which kind of fills in the thing we don't know, which is our grounds of absolute knowledge or whatever. And we could fill it in with either God or naturalism. I mean, naturalists just don't do that because we tend to go based off of empirical evidence of some kind. But it seems like we could. It seems like there's nothing stopping us from just doing the exact same thing the theist is doing and saying we have this ultimate super ground law of physics that necessitates true knowledge and gives us direct beliefs of truthiness. I don't see why that would be any different from what the theist is doing.
Well, part of it, like I said, I mean, if the physical universes are contingent, there don't have to be physical universes. In that case, there couldn't be a physical necessary truth, but there could be a metaphysical necessary truth that doesn't involve God. But physical necessary truths, necessity is used in different ways, obviously. And I'm using it in the logical sense that any possible reality that a necessary truth would be true in. But there are possible realities that are not physical realities, and so there wouldn't be a physical truth that would hold of those realities, and so it wouldn't be a physically necessary truth.
Well, I'm not following this. So I don't care about the universe. I'm saying quantum fields. Quantum fields, the foundation of everything, is necessary. The universe is like an expression of the quantum field. The quantum field is what's necessary. It's it's physical, but it doesn't have. It's outside of space and time, and that seems like all we need.
Well, in what sense? So there couldn't be I don't know quantum fields. I'm not into that subject, but there couldn't be a reality that's not physical and does not involve quantum fields. Because I've never read a philosopher of science who said anything like that. I mean, all philosophers of science that I've read have said that all physical worlds are logically contingent. They could have failed to exist.
Right. So I'm going further than that. I'm saying that scientists are much more modest than theists, and they don't go beyond the evidence. But if I wanted to, I could become an arrogant scientist and parody the theistic argument and say, nope, quantum fields are necessary. They're logically necessary. You can't have anything without a quantum field. Quantum fields are required for any change of any kind. They're required for the law of causality. I can just assert all of these things and give you lots of philosophical arguments for all these things. But ultimately, scientists don't do this because there's no like arrogant scientists like that. But
there are arrogant scientists like that. There are. They just we don't pay attention. You and I don't pay attention to them. That's all.
Well, no, I don't think any scientist actually claims that there is a necessary being that is a quantum field. I don't think that's the case. I don't think necessary being ontology is a thing in science. I don't think any scientist claims that. But if we wanted to, we could. I don't see any problem with us doing the same thing theists are doing and just changing the noun of God to the noun of quantum field and making up a physical necessary being in order to plug this hole of this God of the gaps in our definition of knowledge. And so I don't see the advantage of theism in this case. And obviously I would prefer the scientific route of just saying, no, we don't need a necessary being. There's no reason to assert a necessary being. We need some kind of like empirical evidence for that anyway. But even if you want to require that we need a necessary being, it seems like we could just do that on naturalism and assert a natural necessary being. Like I don't see the advantage of the theistic God here.
Well, if it's necessary, I would say it would not be. I mean, you can define as a natural being, but if you're going to say that it is necessary across all possible realities, then I would say you're meeting the conditions that Bill Talbot did in his book. That would be something similar to what he does. Bill Talbot is primarily focusing on moral truths because he wants to argue that moral truths have this grounding that are absolute in a way, but it would hold for what you're saying too. So you could go that route, but then I would say that what you're calling a natural reality or something within naturalism, most philosophers would not say is contained within naturalism. Most philosophers say at that point you've gone beyond naturalism and you're asserting a necessary something or other that exists independently of each individual reality. So in that case, I would say you can call it philosophers. Most philosophical naturalists would disagree with that as naturalism. That's my impression, though. Now, I would say,
Oh, I agree.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, well, so I agree. I think the same thing applies. The naturalists are more in the humble scientific route camp,
Yeah.
and then they don't go to that necessary level of existence, but they could. I just think that the reason they don't is because it seems unjustified to do so. But if that's your requirement for knowledge, we can do it. And so it doesn't seem like there's an advantage to theism here, because whether you're a naturalist or a theist, you can always just posit this necessary thing. And I don't think it's required, but you could do it either way. And so there's no real advantage to theism in that case. And so it wouldn't be an argument against naturalism. It'd just be an argument against any position that doesn't posit a necessary being.
Right. The reason I would make a distinction there between theism and your suggestion or Bill Talbot's suggestion is because you're looking at the idea that we have to, if you would grant what I'm saying, just for the sake of argument, necessary like this, then if you just assert something that meets those conditions just for the sake of meeting this requirement, it's contrived or ad hoc. It's completely ad hoc. But the concept of a perfect being, that's something that's been present within human culture for as long as we can trace it. People have the idea of a perfect being, of a supreme being. You know, however people describe this, a maximally perfect being that has all positive attributes without limit and no negative attributes. So, you know, people unpack it differently, but the idea of a supreme being is not an ad hoc addition because it's already present and has traditionally been ascribed some of these effects already. So it's not a contrived or ad hoc addition to a theory in order to get to it. But with if you're starting with naturalism or with an atheistic form of Platonism, then you're adding this on in an ad hoc way. You're doing it just to meet this particular requirement that you wouldn't be able to meet otherwise. So that would be a big difference. Cultures tend to form beliefs in God. Individuals tend to form an idea of God. Whether they believe it or not is a different issue. But the idea of a supreme being is something that people are able to form a belief of pretty early. And it's not a contrived or ad hoc idea. Whereas with doing it from suggesting something like a physical or metaphysical non-God that entails these things, the only reason to posit that is because otherwise you don't get knowledge. And that makes it an ad hoc suggestion.
Well, to me, this argument seems to suffer from a fate worse than the evolutionary argument here, because the things that we humans tend to initially believe are things that are usually false. Imaginary friends, anthropocentric fallacies, type 1, type 2 errors. It seems like the vast majority of the things that humans are going to begin believing are going to be wrong every time. It seems to be like the history of science gives us this knowledge. And so to say that the one that we started with, that we believed first simply because we believed it is true, suffers from a worse fate and is even more unjustifiable than even any evolutionary belief, or it is an evolutionary belief or something. And so saying that it's not ad hoc because we believed it in the past it seems like a terrible argument. Whereas because science already has a lot of justification, and you're adding in this new criterion that science doesn't care about, like no one in science thinks we need a necessary being. But if you want to say that's required, then we can of course fill that gap with something other than a God. And simply saying that it's ad hoc, well, of course it's ad hoc because we don't think this is a criterion. If we thought this was a legitimate criterion, we could come up with a solution similar to a necessary being, which we don't think it's an actual criterion. And so I've not seen the fact that humans tend to believe in anthropocentric entities throughout the history of humanity as being a justified reason to prefer your hypothesis here.
Well, I'm saying that I'd make 2 points here. First, that the fact that people have had this idea, sometimes had this belief throughout human history, isn't saying beyond the claim that it would be not ad hoc to show that we have an explanatory thing in our power, in our sphere of explanations already. as opposed to having to invent one in order to meet the criteria. But any explanation is going to be more than ad hocness, right? You got all kinds of things that come into this. So ad hocness is, I think here that would be a significant criterion for why naturalism doesn't meet this meet the necessary requirements. But going back to your first point that their first beliefs tend to be false, I think you have to get into this Morean concept of most people have these simple beliefs. I'm looking at a doorknob. I think it's a doorknob. That I believe that if you drop a car from 2 miles up, it will fall down rather than up. I mean, we have all these Morean beliefs after G.E. Moore that are true. So the idea that we often form false beliefs, I think generally our daily walking around the house with beliefs are true. I think the majority of our beliefs will tend to be true. Otherwise, I don't think you could function. So the fact that the history of science has shown some of our fundamental beliefs, or even less fundamental beliefs, have often been false, doesn't change the fact that I think Daniel Dennett put it. Regardless of what you believe about these things, an ancient Greek believed about it, he could still go to the market and buy a nice pair of sandals, right? And there are plenty of true beliefs that fed into this, and they outnumber the false beliefs that are corrected later by scientific discovery. So it's not that I don't think it's true that we tend to form mostly false beliefs.
Right. Just to clarify, I wasn't making an argument that we form mostly false beliefs.
Oh,
I'm
okay.
saying specific beliefs we know that we form are typically false. So anthropocentric fallacies, type 1 and type 2 errors. We hear rustle in the bushes. The people who think it's a lion run away. People who think it's the wind or decide to be all scientific and be like, I'm going to wait for more evidence, might get eaten. So the people who run away and think it's a lion survive more, reproduce more. And so people tend to believe that there's a monster under the bread, the darkness, there's a monster in the darkness, imaginary friends, that there's always this hyperactive agency detective system in humans where we think there's a mind that does the thing that we're looking at. Well, whether it's volcanoes, hurricanes, tornadoes, it's always a mind. And that typical conclusion is wrong pretty much every time it involves anything
it's not
bigger
wrong
than humans.
I mean, I'm interacting with you and I'm assuming you have a mind. It's not
bigger than humans.
Now.
So whenever that's applied to something bigger than humans, it's wrong every time in human history. There's never been a correct case, as far as we know, that's ever been verified that it was correct when it was bigger than just a human made a pot.
Well, I don't know about the vast majority of time bigger than human. I don't know, but I would just say that philosopher. I came into philosophy. I was not a Christian. I in my mid-20s, I decided I was going to sit down and refute Christianity to set my conscience at ease, and I ended up arguing myself into it. So I encountered a lot of the arguments. I mean, most of the arguments that are around against, at least classical arguments against theism, I've encountered, and I don't think that they work. Now, I'm not saying that they don't have some strength to them. I just don't think they ultimately prove their point. So I would say that we have this belief. It seems, or at least we have this concept of a perfect being. And until we have a specific reason to think this perfect being does not exist, it's justified to believe it. There are beliefs that are innocent until proven guilty. Like my belief that you have a mind. You don't have to prove that. And you couldn't prove that you have a first person spark of self-consciousness. That maybe you can give an argument that makes it more likely than not, but it wouldn't be at the level of how confident I am that you are another mind, that the physical world is real. You don't have to prove that before I believe it. If you have a good reason, if you have a way of proving that it's not the case, then once you prove that, okay. But some beliefs are innocent until proven guilty. Because if that's not the case, you're just left with complete skepticism. I mean, a belief is guilty until proven innocent. So you have a proof, but then that proof is another belief, and that has to be proven. That has to be assumed guilty before proven innocent, and it's an infinite regress, and you never know anything. So some beliefs have to be innocent until proven guilty, and I think, and I'm not going to push this, but I think, Plantinga does say this, that there's a big debate in philosophy over the last several decades on this, that belief in God can, not always, but can be one of these innocent until proven guilty beliefs. Until we have Until someone has a reason to think that that God does not exist, they're justified God does exist. And so you're saying it's always, and no, to get back to what you were saying, that all of our beliefs about minds that are bigger than
Humans.
a human being are always proven false. Well, I'm not convinced. I don't think that would prove that my belief in an ultimate being would be proven false, because I don't think that belief in a supreme being is something that was built up, that you're starting with something simple, and then you build up to something slightly greater than human beings, and then slightly greater and slightly greater. Maybe there's a world mind, maybe each tree is conscious, and all this, until you get to an ultimate supreme being. So what I'm saying when I talk about it not being an ad hoc belief is that people seem to be starting with the concept, at least, of and unpack it. So I don't think it's a matter of building up and then, and since every step would be false, that therefore the top step is also false. I think that the top step is something that we start with, whether we accept it or not, but it is a different issue. But most cultures throughout history have believed, or at least had the idea of a supreme being. And again, how you unpack it is different. Muslims unpack it differently than Jews and Christians do, right? The idea of a perfect being.
Well, sure. So the way I see it, I don't think we start with that belief. I think we start with a brain which identifies agency in everything we don't understand. So we see something we don't understand, we think it's an agent. And that applies to every level, whether it's supreme being or what caused the volcano or what caused lightning. If there's something we don't know, because of our hyperactive agency detection system in our brain, which is what we start with, we label it with a mind of some kind of agency did the thing we don't understand. And so since that method of our brain has been proven false so synonymously throughout any case that just wasn't a human, that methodology is something we have a defeater for. We have a defeater to say that, no, if you think there's an unknown like creator of the universe and it's a mind like a human, you're probably wrong, because it's probably your hyperactive agency detection system. And that seems like a much more plausible evidential-based position, rather than saying, well, people like always had this belief forever and they started with it, therefore it's reasonable to accept as not ad hoc.
Well, it wouldn't be ad hoc, regardless whether you like it or not. But I would also say my reading of Evolutionary, the evolution of religion, right, is that the idea that we started with those beliefs and ascribing intentionality in minds and building up from there. My understanding of that, what was his name? Evans Pritchard, something like that. Beliefs like that, or claims of evolutionary development like that, have been largely rejected by the evolution of religion scholarly community for like half a century or more. That this is something that you find in like the late 19th century and first half of the 20th century. I could be wrong because that's not my field, right? But I have read into that subject, and what I have read said that this idea that it builds up from this to belief in a supreme God, that has been long rejected. That's what my readings have told me. Okay. And I'm not reading Christians. I'm not reading theists. This is just like people I've read on this subject. Now, having said that, I would also say ad hocness is a very important element in forming a rational hypothesis. So if you have to form an ad hoc explanation in order to account for something, then there's unless the other criteria in forming a rational hypothesis overrule the level of ad hocness, and you have another explanation that's not ad hoc, then the ad hoc explanation is more rational. It is preferable for a rational explanation. Now, the objection that could overrule that and make the new explanation that is ad hoc, but it's still a better explanation. There's all kinds
ad hocness doesn't really matter here, because again, this is like an argument against naturalism. So if I can add an ad hoc position in naturalism that solves the problem, well, then it's not an argument against naturalism anymore. So it doesn't matter if it's ad hoc. But the point here is that simply saying that naturalism doesn't work because we don't have a prior hypothesis of naturalism to explain this thing that naturalism doesn't care about, obviously doesn't work, because obviously we can add in new things to naturalism. We can make up a new hypothesis, make up a new law, make up a new necessary natural thing to solve these problems.
For naturalism, that's my point. That's what naturalist philosophers say, that if you do that, so that's necessary, and you're doing that, then it's no longer naturalism.
I've never heard any philosophers say that. Like, I don't see, there's no logical contradiction with a necessary natural thing. I don't see any problem with that.
Well, it's not a contradiction. It would just say that naturalism claims that at least philosophical naturalism is the idea that the only reality is the contingent reality of physical worlds, and so there's no logical necessity there.
I've never seen that anywhere in any definition.
Maybe I've read, I couldn't people. I don't know, but that's what I've read from the naturalist philosophers that I've read. That's the claim of naturalism.
As far as I know, naturalism doesn't use the terms necessary and contingent in its ontology. It's just not a part of the ontology. It's like a theist ontology. And then I don't see any, there's no contradiction with just saying there's a necessary natural thing. I don't see why that would be a problem.
Well, again, I just say that for saying that there's a necessity, a logical necessity, or as Bill Talbot says, a metaphysical necessity. That's what he prefers to describe it as. But saying that there's a logical necessity to these things is something that you're saying that naturalism doesn't involve an ontology that involves those terms. Like, okay, but the claim is that an ontology that accounts for certain things would have those terms, regardless of whether a naturalist ontology acknowledges it. That's the argument. The argument is that there has to be something necessary.
Right. Just to clarify,
we've gone astray from my original argument here. Now we're kind of debating some of the underlying issues. We've been debating some of the underlying issues for a while, it seems.
Well, yeah, just to clarify. So in current naturalism, the current consensus of naturalism is, you don't need necessary contingent. That's just irrelevant. They're not real categories. They're just made up things by human imagination. Like, I don't know, pick a philosopher who's made up a distinction that you reject. And it's probably one of those. But there's nothing in naturalism that's stopping us from being able to answer these questions. So like, we could say there is a necessary natural thing. Like, we could do that. And there's no contradiction there. And so saying that a necessary thing is required wouldn't be an argument against naturalism, because we can have that in naturalism. There's no contradiction between those two things. And so it seems like the argument against naturalism doesn't work against naturalism. It just works against any worldview that doesn't say there's a necessary thing. And so I don't see the argument for why you would need a non-natural thing to be necessary. Like, that part I wasn't following. Like, I don't see why we would need that at all.
Well, you said several times that there's not a contradiction. Do you think the law of non-contradiction is not necessary? Because the law of non-contradiction. Yeah, go. Sorry.
I think the law of non-contradiction is a description of the nature of reality. I don't think the law of non-contradiction exists as a proposition anywhere. I don't think that there's like a Platonic law of non-contradiction. I think it's just a word we made up, like the word tree, to describe the way reality is.
So do you think it's logically possible for there to be another world where there are real contradictions? I mean, that's a philosophical position held by Graham Priest and Bill Talbot. They both accept you can have true contradictions.
No, I don't think that's possible. So I think there is a reality, which is all possible realities, all possible ways reality could be, essentially. And there's no way you could create a language to describe that where it is itself and not itself at the same time. But that's not because there is this like prescribing law of non-contradiction. It's just the words don't describe reality. That's all it is. So you can't construct so the point here is that you don't need a law of non-contradiction to supervene above reality. Reality is its own nature, which happens to be this way. And we create words to describe that, but the words don't mean anything. The words don't govern anything. The laws of logic don't govern anything.
Well, whether you take it as prescriptive or descriptive, I mean, it would still be something that transcends individual universes and even physicality. I mean, the law of non-contradiction applies to non-physical claims as much as, I mean, if someone says God both exists and doesn't exist, a contradiction, and we would apply it there too.
Right. We can apply language to things that don't exist. I agree, but that doesn't mean that.
Sorry. Yeah. No, but what I'm saying is that it would apply. It would apply all over the place, and even if it's just descriptive, it would be a necessary claim. Even if it's something that we recognize about the world, after the fact, right? Well, so what? It's still something that's true of all possible realities, and so that's what we mean by saying something is logically necessary. And to say it's just words, okay, it's just words. It's a logically necessary concept, whatever you want to call it.
Sure. So like I can take things in reality and apply those things in reality to things that aren't in reality, like
Mhm.
the unicorn is pink or something,
The
and pink
gold mountain,
flowers, whatever.
right? Which
And
is
so
what,
I can take
yeah.
like the laws of logic are descriptions of the way reality is, and I can take those things that are the way reality is and
Mhm.
apply those to other things. Like, that's
Right.
fine. Like words, like the word tree, I can imaginary tree or whatever. But that
Mhm.
doesn't mean that there's any kind of logic outside of reality. That's all just reality, and we're taking that and applying it to other things that doesn't apply to.
Okay, but still, you would say that it would apply to these things that could exist but don't. You'd still be
Sure.
applying it to those things, or you say it could apply to, or would be descriptive of those things. But in that
Sure.
case, it would, and to say that it's part of reality, well, sure. If you're saying if you're identifying reality with the universe, then I might have a problem with the physical universe. Then there might be a problem. But if you're just identifying it with whatever exists, then yeah, sure. But then it's something that applies to all possible realities, whether they exist or not. In which case, it transcends the individual. This description would be true in all possible worlds, so it's relevant to call it logically necessary. Even if you just want to say it's words, it's still a logical necessity.
Right, but the thing that's logically necessary is the quantum field. So that's what I'm saying. The quantum field is what's logically necessary, and we're just describing the nature of the quantum field with these uh, language like A equals A or whatever. And so, for a unicorn to exist in universe B, it would need
Yeah.
to have a quantum field in it. And so, for it to describe the unicorn, there would have to be a quantum field, and so that's what would ground all of the different things we describe as logic. But all of the logic itself is no different from English. It's just a language humans made up to describe the nature of the quantum field. The nature of the quantum field is what's necessary, and logic and language are just ways to describe that. So it's a physical thing that's necessary. The physical nature of the quantum field is the necessary thing, and it grounds all of the relations that entail A equals A and A does not equal not A.
Well, you said that, but if you said it's physical, but you also said it transcends. In what sense is it physical? I mean, you said earlier
Space and
that
time is space and time is a particular field. So the consensus in physics is space and time is emergent from a more fundamental physical thing. So there's space and time is just a field. There's lots of other kinds of fields that are not space and time.
okay, but it's still considered physical, even though it's not spatial or temporal.
Yes, all of the fields are physical, and most of them don't have space time. Space time is one field.
Okay, I mean, this is something I don't know about this stuff. I don't know quantum fields, but I would just say that, like for example, I've always heard that space and time and empty space, but I've heard that space and or time are necessary contingents for physicality. But I haven't read about it, so I don't know. That's just what I've gleaned from like the back of my mind when reading other things. So that's interesting. I don't know anything about.
I would suggest just Google emergent spacetime.
Mhm.
It'll lead you to all the papers. That's
Yeah.
the consensus in
But
physics.
now to come back to what I was saying about ad hocness, though, even if you have that, you would still have to add something onto it, which was the ad hocness that I was talking about, that renders minds that reliably form true beliefs, and that do so in a way that grounds those beliefs, so that that you believe those things because they're true. If that's the case, then you can go with it. But I mean, it would be an ad hoc solution as opposed to a metaphysical solution that's been around for thousands of years, and which I don't think the arguments against have really dismantled significantly. So I think so that's why I'm pushing the ad hocness, because if you have a non-ad hoc solution and an ad hoc solution, but the non-ad hoc solution is for other reasons unacceptable, which is what you're taking it to be, then you go with the ad hoc solution. Presumably, there's other factors that filter into it, and those are more of a benefit than the ad hocness is a detriment. Okay, and I don't think that's the case, because I don't think the end of the not the ad hoc, the traditional non-ad hoc belief that there is a supreme being. I don't think that I don't think those overrule the strength of its not being ad hoc. So that would be that's what I'm taking to be different between the two of you, between the two of us.
Right. So there's two parts there. One is that if this is an argument against naturalism, all we need to show is that there's a logical way for naturalism to explain it, and then it wouldn't be an argument against naturalism anymore. So that's the first thing. And we can make up if you have like an argument against, I don't know, unicorns, you can make up as many ad hoc things as you want to show unicorns are possible solutions to whatever the argument is, just to show it's not a counter to unicorns. It doesn't matter if they're ad hoc, because the point is just to show this doesn't refute unicorns. But then there's the question, like you said before, of which theory is better for particular reasons. And if the theory, the ad hoc one, is preferable because the other one has lots of problems, then we would go with the ad hoc one. And that's the second question. So the first question is this an argument against naturalism? I would say no, because we can ad hoc add in necessary natural things. So this isn't really an argument against naturalism. It's only an argument against contemporary versions of naturalism, I think. But the second thing is, I think that the supreme being methodology seems to be pretty terrible for my position. It seems to be nothing more than...
I've gleaned that from the discussion. Yeah.
To me, it seems like Zeus creates lightning kind of a thing. It seems to be exactly synonymous with, well, Zeus creates lightning. Well, look, there's a big lightning thing. Who did it? Zeus did it. And that's essentially synonymous. And so I don't think...
What if you expand naturalism to include the existence of Zeus?
Well, you could do that, but I would say that the point of naturalism is unguided forces. So it's just... That's usually how I define naturalism: unguided natural forces instead of minds. You usually just use those as contradictory terms. But it's, if someone came up to you and said, I have this theory that Zeus creates some kind of phenomenon we don't understand yet, and you said, well, I could explain that with naturalism or a different hypothesis, just making up a different thing, like, yeah, let's say it's a bunch of random particles in the sky bunching into each other. Well, that's ad hoc. You can't just ad hoc make up like a bunch of particles in the clouds rubbing together. I have this theory of Zeus. Zeus was not an ad hoc theory. We already had these beliefs of Zeus for thousands of years. Mm-hmm. Which do you think is more rational here? Like, the fact that they had beliefs of Zeus for tens of thousands of years or whatever, prior to this ad hoc explanation of physical forces, or the fact that, well, we know that's probably this thing where humans make up beliefs about minds doing stuff, and it's probably the physical forces things has a lot more grounding in past experience of actually solving problems. So this combination, using a combination of known principles, particles, and laws in physics to solve the problem, even if it's only ad hoc or hypothetical, still seems to be better than positing things that we don't have any evidence for, like non-physical minds.
Well, let me ask it to you this way. Let's say that the first person who proposed that the earth was round said the earth is round because the bottom of our feet are curved, and that's in order to walk around on the surface of the earth. Now, that's a true belief, but and the person who thinks the earth is flat says that, well, it's because it appears to be flat. Everywhere we go, it seems to be flat. We can see for all whatever the evidences would be. And they would have some degree of a rational belief for thinking it's flat. It would just ultimately be incorrect. The person who suggested the earth was round would not be giving a better explanation of that. Even though the claim is ultimately true, it's ridiculous, right? So I don't think that the first person suggesting a ridiculous idea just by virtue of guessing right is going to be the more rational explanation.
Oh, totally fair. So just to clarify, I'm saying that a person who builds a hypothesis based off of known principles, particles, and laws that have already been verified to exist independent of our imagination is a better hypothesis than one that adds in things that haven't been verified to exist independent of our imagination. So like if we see a footprint in the snow, we say that's probably a horse. A horse probably did the footprint. And somebody says it's probably a unicorn. It's probably wrong. That's a bad hypothesis. Don't go with the unicorn. Horse is much better here because it's a combination of other things that have independent verification. And so in the case of lightning and Zeus, if we say, you know, like there's lots of physical forces that we know about. We know that we can interact with them. We know that they cause things. We don't know about any kind of non-physical minds that interact with the universe in this way. And so building a hypothesis based on the natural forces hypothesis is kind of like the horse, whereas adding in this mind thingy seems to be more like the unicorn. And I say the same thing would apply to
mind thingy.
Yeah.
It's a good word for a rock band. Sorry.
But yeah. So I see that the reason it's better is because it's a combination of principles, particles, and laws that have been verified independently of our imagination, whereas the mind hypothesis seems to be adding in parts that haven't been verified to be existent independent of our imagination, and we have pretty good reason to think they are part of our imagination.
Well, I disagree with the second part, but I would say with regard to what about the first person who sees a meteor strike? They wouldn't have something that they knew already existed. Or even what about the first person that encounters, or just the first scientists who encounter a a divot in the ground from a meteor strike, and they posit maybe there are these things that come down. It looks like something that might have been hit by an impact, and they're scientifically speculating about this, but it's a reasonable claim for them to make that even though they haven't observed it, they still can assert that this is a good explanation.
Oh, right. So my argument here is that the good explanation is one that's using combinations of things they know about in the past and have good evidence to believe in the past, and never adding new things in that we don't have reason to believe in the past. So like if we saw a crater,
adding new explanations in that you don't have would be ad hoc.
Well, I would include that. It doesn't matter if you believe it in the past. Like if you happen to believe in spirits, if they didn't have good evidence, I'd say it's still terrible to add those into the hypothesis. So say someone believed in spirits for thousands of years, but they didn't have any good evidence for it. They just believed it. And they used the spirits to explain the lightning bolt. I'd still say that's pretty terrible. I'd like, nope, the better hypothesis is still the one that's using combinations of things that have been like empirically verified, rocks hitting each other, particles, whatever. So it's like in your toolbox of possible things you can use as an explanation is the things that have been empirically verified, particles, rocks, hurricanes, blah, 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 whatever. And then there's the things that have not been empirically verified, spirits, ghosts, magic, miracles, et cetera, et cetera.
Other minds.
And what do you say?
Other minds can't be empirically verified. The minds of
yeah. I'd say that we can actually empirically verify them, because to empirically verify doesn't mean direct experience of the thing in and of itself. You can say indirect observation is still observation. So we can't directly see neutrinos, but we can see their effect. We say if neutrinos exist, they will cause this effect. We observe, we see the effects, neutrinos exist. And so we can say if other minds exist, they'll do this effect. And if we see the effect, we can infer other minds exist. So I can say we can indirectly observe.
That doesn't explain that. I have a great deal of confidence in other minds, and it as an explanatory hypothesis saying that other people seem to behave as if they were other minds. That does not justify at all the confidence I have that other minds exist. That would make me say, I think it's more plausible that other minds exist than not, but I'm much more confident than that. And I don't think I'm wrong in having that confidence. So saying that I'm explaining it by things that I've observed before and I don't have to directly experience it. Well, that doesn't justify my confidence that other minds exist. I mean, it might justify just a bare that they do.
That's a slightly different topic. So my argument here is that using combinations of things that we have verified as the explanation of any unknown is a better hypothesis than adding in anything that we don't have empirical basis for, that has never made any testable predictions successfully ever.
It has. I mean, the idea that there's a supreme being that created the universe. The claim is, for millennia, theists, Jews, Christians, Muslims have claimed that the universe began to exist. And for those same millennia, the non-theists claim, no, it didn't exist. It's just always existed. And they didn't prediction, but it ultimately was the theist claim was verified with Big Bang cosmology, and the non-theist claim was disconfirmed with it. So I think you do have something there. I don't think it's just random.
Well, I think that's
beside the point. I'm sorry, this is getting far afield of my argument, but this is what I would say. I'm sorry, I'm not letting you respond to that kind of big point. I apologize. I would just say that you can explain any physical combination without a mind, any physical combination of scenarios without a mind. I grant that completely, but that's why I think that I say that there's you can explain a universe in which everyone has the same beliefs as we do, but none of it is knowledge because none of them believe it for the right reason, right? They believe the earth is round because the bottom of their feet are curved, right? So you can have a physically identical universe with that. And so there has to be something more that explains how something goes from just true belief to knowledge. And just having the physical components with no mind, which is your definition of naturalism, would allow the possibility of just an infinite number of even physically identical worlds, but with people having very different beliefs or beliefs that aren't believed for the right reasons or whatever, so they don't have knowledge. So in order to say that that knowledge is possible, you have to have something. I mean, I haven't argued this in the books really, right, that I've written, but you have to have, I think, a teleological explanation, a mind explanation would be better, because it does allow for that possibility. The naturalistic explanation, everything is just happens by physical processes. It would allow you to predict the physical processes. It wouldn't allow you to predict knowledge, genuine knowledge. So that's what I would. That's basically how I would come down to it. That's why I think the explaining everything by physical processes that you can physically confirm is not going to be successful, because it doesn't explain ultimately the possibility of knowledge. Even though it explains the same physicality of everything, it doesn't explain the knowledge side of it, which is why I think it's a philosophical problem and not a scientific problem.
Right. And my argument would be, is it seems to me like a kind of a God of the gaps, in that there's something we don't know about, and we can posit a solution to the thing we don't know about, which is God. But I think there's nothing stopping us from positing a solution, which is an unknown natural thing, in the exact same respect.
Well, I don't think it's a God of the gaps, because I'm not saying we don't know what could possibly do this. We're saying we have a reason for thinking that mindless processes would not achieve this philosophical point that I'm making. We have a specific reason for thinking that. And so in light of that, I'm not filling a gap with the concept of God. So I don't think it's a God of the gaps argument at all.
Well, it seems like the intelligent design argument for DNA, essentially. It's like, the probability of DNA forming on its own, given our known processes, is very, very low. Therefore, God did it. And so if we have some reason to think that the probability of this occurring under naturalism is low, you're positing a new hypothesis where the probability is higher, like what's one necessary. And therefore, you're saying your hypothesis is better. But I'm saying, well, we could just say under naturalism the probability is one. You just say there's laws of physics that are going to determine it to be this way, and it's necessarily that's going to determine it this way. And so we now also have a probability where the hypothesis is one under naturalism. And I don't see any difference between those two. One, except for one has lots more evidence.
Right. Well, it doesn't. I mean, because you don't have evidence for achieving that. You have evidence for getting the same physical reality. You don't have evidence for getting the same physical reality with the same beliefs attached to the physical reality, so that people tend to form true beliefs. People sometimes have items of knowledge. What you get is the same physical reality. Maybe people even forming the same beliefs, but not for the right reason. That's why
I'm saying, I'm going further than that. I'm saying there's a necessary law that necessitates that these beliefs will be true, and it's not logically possible for us to not have these true beliefs. So there's not another possible world with the same physical states and wrong beliefs. Like in physics, the laws determine it that we're going to be true, and it's necessarily the case that these particular beliefs are going to be true, or particular knowledge is possible. So the same way God does it, like it's logically impossible for God to give us false beliefs directly.
Well, yeah.
And so it's logically impossible for this law of physics to give us false beliefs. It has to give us true beliefs.
Well, but again, I mean, that would be something that it would give us true beliefs, but I don't think that would make it. So that would be, is there no parallel or parallel world where under this reality where people could form mostly false beliefs? Wouldn't that be a possibility under evolutionary processes, that people that some species evolves with some kind of false beliefs that are actually more common than true beliefs? I think that's a possibility under naturalism.
Well, I'm saying no. I'm saying that there's this extra law of physics we haven't discovered yet that prevents any of those possible worlds from existing. So there's extra law of physics, which is the knowledge law, and it's a necessary law, and it prevents any of those mostly false belief worlds from happening.
I guess I would just come back down to it. I mean, there's absolutely no reason to think that such a law exists, but we do have good arguments for the existence of God. You don't accept them, I assume, right? But yeah. For me, again, I came into it not believing in God, and I came out of it believing in God. So I argued myself into belief in God.
So if the arguments didn't work, then it would be equally as irrational to believe in both.
No, because one would still be ad hoc. Because whether the arguments didn't work, that wouldn't mean that the arguments against God did work. You would just be left with agnosticism, but you still have this idea present throughout all human cultures that there is a supreme being. And so that would not be ad hoc to think that this supreme being, since it's already in our concept base, not concept base, we wouldn't have to be going outside of the concept base to explain the phenomenon. Whereas with an ad hoc solution, you do have to go outside of that.
Yeah, I just say that I don't think the fact that it existed in human knowledge prior is any form of justification whatsoever. I don't think that
it just makes it less ad hoc. It's that one criterion. It just makes it less ad hoc.
Well, I don't think it does.
You can prove it to be false. That's fine. But if people already have beliefs like this, they naturally form beliefs like this, and if it has not been completely shown that to be false, which I don't think it has, but obviously you disagree. But if it hasn't been shown to be false, then it's not implausible to include it in your explanatory scope. And it wouldn't be a God of the solution. I don't think it would be.
That's probably what I'm arguing there. Is I don't think that the fact that it exists prior in human knowledge gives us absolutely no basis of whatsoever to add it into our potential hypothesis pool. In order to add it into the legitimate hypothesis pool, you need like novel testable predictions. And I wouldn't count the Big Bang as one, because it's either it was eternal or had a beginning. It's like a 50-50. It's not like Hinduism is the only religion that's made a very successful prediction, which is it predicted the age of the earth was 4.3 billion years ago, which is like 95% accurate. Very good prediction, very accurate. That's the only thing I count as a.
They predicted the universe is 4.3.
Earth.
I'll have to read that, because that's not what I read. What I read was that they predicted a universe like that. Yeah.
Well, the predicted universe is significantly older, but they predicted the age of the Earth, just the Earth, was 4.3 billion, and then
what did they predict the universe as? Maybe it was a different number that I'm thinking of.
Well, they didn't. They predicted something more than the universe, because they think that Brahma wakes up in sleep cycles, and every time he wakes up in a sleep cycle, the universe gets reset. And that's not just our universe. There's multiple. Right. It's like the multiverse.
When was the last resetting? Yeah, I mean, if you're, I don't know.
Some insanely big number that I don't know. But it's bigger than.
Yeah, I have the recollection. I don't know, but it was like over 100 billion years or something like that. Maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah. Yeah, but that wasn't the universe. That's the multiverse, because there are subset. Right. Yeah. So, but anyway, that's a really good prediction. And so if that kind of prediction was made by this hypothesis, then yes, I grant it as a legitimate grounds for building a hypothesis. But to me, the fact that people just had the belief in the past doesn't. And so I don't even see it as a potential hypothesis that we can use as explanations yet, because I don't think it has enough grounding to be that. But I do think like physical stuff does have that, because we have lots of empirical evidence of physical stuff. So those are the Lego pieces we can use to build hypotheses for unknowns.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on. Let me get back. But I don't think you'd say the Hindus had very good reason for making the prediction they made of 4.3 billion years, right? It was just they got lucky. They had the reasons why they believed that were different from the reasons that we presumed to be the right reasons.
Well, hypothetically, like you can say, if their God was real and their God gave them this message of the book and told them that the universe was approximately 4.3 billion years old or whatever, then they could have had a good reason. I don't think they did, obviously, but it's possible that they did have good reason, and that's how they knew it. And if they made lots of these,
you and I have to go look at the Bhagavad Gita and make sure that's to see if they, because I'm just wondering if it was closer to something like believing the earth is round because of the bottoms of our feet. I mean, it could be that. So in which case, even if the prediction turned out true, it would still not be a valuable prediction.
Well, I wouldn't say that. So I'd say that if the Bhagavad Gita made a bunch of these predictions, DNA is a double helix, the moon is 255,000 kilometers away.
Oh yeah, okay, you're right. Yeah.
Now I wouldn't care why. If they said it for the silliest reason, because Brahma said so, because Brahma's feet were round and he liked to make the moon that far away, that's fine. It doesn't matter what reason, because they got it right. And so if the reasons they posit seem ridiculous, like Brahma had an itch on his foot, and that's how it, like the moon flaked off because he scratched his butt or something, and that's why it's 255,000 miles away. That's still justified to believe if they got it right. And so if they got a bunch of these right, even if it's for seemingly ridiculous reasons, that's still good evidence to believe that they have a good hypothesis, or a better one than anything else. And so lots of novel successful predictions.
Why they know it, though. You wouldn't, even though they make all these correct predictions, you wouldn't accept their explanation for why.
I would. If there's a Bible that makes all these predictions, what? So if there's a Bible that makes
like the scratch the butt explanation of who it is, you would say, okay, well, since they get all these predictions right, I would grant, it's likely that there is this the non-physical reality that best explains, and that's the scratching the butt hypothesis.
Yes, 100%. Like if there was a Bible that said got all these facts right, and they got it right first 6,000 years ago, it doesn't matter. Whatever it says, that's reasonable to believe anything in that book, because it gets things more right than anything else we have.
We should trademark the phrase "scratching your butt" hypothesis.
Yes, that's a good one.
I lost track of what I was saying. I said there was going to be two things, and I did the Hindu thing, and I forgot what the second one was. Oh man, what were we talking about before or after Hinduism? You said something And I had this brilliant riposte that, is probably lost to the annals of time. But now, do you remember what it was?
No, I got, my mind is still on the scratching your butt hypothesis. So
Sorry, I distracted myself with that.
sorry. Well, we've been going for about an hour and a half. Seems
geez.
like a good time to wrap up. I really appreciate you coming on. It was a great conversation. Do you want to give links or references where people can find more about your work, your books and stuff?
You can go to academia.edu and just search for my name. I've got papers and reviews, and the first chapters of both books on there if they want to read them. So yeah, that's it. And also look in the future for God scratching his butt hypothesis.com. Yeah.
Add in my orchid so I get like a co-author thing. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, of course. Yes.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for coming on. Really appreciate it. And I will let you go. And I hope you have a wonderful day.
Thanks. You too, man. It's a pleasure.